Hey everybody, it's another casual Sunday here in my home office. Um, it's Sunday night and we are getting ready to start week 14, getting so very close to the end of the semester, which is pretty thrilling. At this point, you should have your list back. Oh wait, that's the other class. Erase that. So this coming week, I think we have no extraneous activities. You'll be doing your usual um, discussion in class, but no quiz this week. And you did your reflexive journal for last week, so we're going to get right into the work of the week. This week we are discussing religion and spirituality and magic and all of these associated ways of people seeing the world. We're going to look at how we understand religion around the world, what sort of forms religion takes, how religious rituals work, and how religion is linked to political and social action. You know, anthropologists have pretty much always studied religion, and early researchers found that the range of religious beliefs they came across seemed almost not understandable. Early anthropologists looked at small-scale societies and assumed that because their political organization, for instance, was small and uncomplicated, that meant their religion was as well. But as we got deeper into it, we found that that was entirely not the case, and it made it hard for us to divide religious practices up into those tidy little typologies that anthropologists appear to look so much like so much. So we're going to look at 4 different ways of thinking about and organizing religion over the course of this week's reading. And we're going to start with Edward Tyler's religious typology, in which he divided all of the religious groups up into an evolutionary model, right? As we found out so far, those were kind of all the place where anthropology started. A relatively ethnocentric place. But in Tyler's model, he saw some religions as being based on animism. This means that the people worship nature spirits in trees and rocks and rivers. Then if they really worked at it and evolved to the next stage, they would become polytheistic. This means they have several gods or goddesses. And if they really, really worked it out, they would eventually end up with monotheism, which was, of course, the religion type of religion that his own culture practiced. Now, Tyler argued eventually, if people really got on this religious evolution thing, they would end up in the land of science and pure reason, and religion would entirely go away. So, as we can see, that is 100% not happened. Okay, so we clearly need another model, a model that's better than Tyler's. So in the 20th century, Wallace looked at religious ceremonies and rituals and came up with a definition of religion that folks use quite a bit in the field of anthropology. This is beliefs and rituals concerned with supernatural beings, powers, and forces. It's important to note here that we're not, when we say supernatural beings, powers, and forces, we're not just talking about sort of science fiction-y crazy bad movie sort of things here, but things that are larger. If you think of the natural world as that we can see, right, then the supernatural is everything beyond what we can see. Wallace thought that there was an element of the supernatural in all religions, but that it varied quite a bit worldwide. We had things like the animism that Tyler spoke of, to more amorphous supernatural forces like what the native Hawaiians called mana. This is a belief that sacred power was in certain high-ranking people, sacred objects, and special spaces. You could think of mana as being like the Force. That's a comparison that we make quite a bit in anthropology, helps people to wrap their head around it. Now, Wallace's approach to religion was pretty useful, but it didn't really do enough to explain religious change over time, and it didn't really explain why people were so passionate about their religion. So we moved on again to Clifford Geertz, who is really interested in symbolic anthropology, right? How symbols help shape the way people see the world. And he thought that religion could, perhaps unsurprisingly, be best described as a system of symbols. So Here's his definition: that religion was a system of symbols that acted to establish powerful, pervasive, and long-lasting moods and motivations in men by formulating conceptions of a general order of existence and clothing these conceptions with such an aura of factuality that the moods and motivations seemed uniquely realistic. So, in his view of religion, the most important thing are these symbols that seem intensely real and factual to believers. This means that when an outsider looks at a religious system, they often see mythological parables, whereas to insiders, those same stories are historical fact. Most of the time, we can't really point one way or another to the historicity of religious belief, but we do see that these symbols help to create purpose and meaning and help to motivate behavior in the populations that believe them. Religious symbols are part of a worldview, a general approach to or set of shared, unquestioning assumptions about the world and how it looks. Symbols help to describe a model of how the world should be, as well as a model for how the world should morally be. Okay, so lots of anthropologists use this definition of religion as part of an interpretive approach, where we look at the symbols and try to understand how they illustrate the interconnections within a society. Now, this system, of course, argues that all people have a basic need for meaning and making sense of the world, which many people argue that that is true, but not everybody, and that it also doesn't adequately distinguish religion from all the other pieces of our world, like science and common sense and the law, and that it doesn't really look at religion as part of an emotional experience of belief. And it sees religion as being an individual experience as opposed to a social phenomenon, which it totally is, right? Beliefs are powerful because we socially enact them repeatedly together in groups. So our textbook kind of takes a little bit from each of these, not as much from Tyler, but a little bit from each of the other ones, and puts them together into religion as a system of social action. When people perform the rituals of their religion, they are doing something that is different than everyday life and with a desired outcome for it. So that makes it a symbolic system that is socially enacted through which rituals, one that includes these four elements. First of all, you have to have the existence of things that are more powerful than human beings. Sometimes this is a supernatural force, but sometimes it's the worldview or cosmology that situates the place of human beings in the universe. So it would include the folks who are like, I don't really have religion, but I believe in a common force for good in the world, right? That would still meet that definition. Okay, your religion needs to have beliefs and behaviors that support, surround, and promote the acceptance that these things more powerful than humans actually exist. You need symbols that make these beliefs and behaviors seem both intense and genuine. And you need social settings, including usually important rituals that people share while experiencing the power of these symbols of belief. So we can take this approach to religion and use it to help us understand some contemporary things, okay? So we're going to dig a little bit here into the suicide bombings that we've seen in the Middle East. We want to question how a behavior that seems so unthinkable to the rest of us could become commonplace in this region. So thinking about this subject is really hard for us and hard to apply cultural relativism to, right? It's easier for us to look at it and say that's totally irrational and it's evil and leave it at that. But the people that committed those acts don't think of themselves as irrational or evil, and we're trying to understand what they are thinking. Now, the 9/11 hijackers were members of Al-Qaeda, right? Which was formed by Osama bin Laden to wage a holy struggle, or jihad in Arabic, against those who were perceived as oppressing Muslims. Now, jihad actually has a much broader meaning in Islam, mostly referred to as the personal struggle to follow God's will. But bin Laden took that piece of religious dogma and used it to radicalize hundreds of disaffected young men to view it as a holy war. He took people without a purpose and gave them one, sharing bin Laden's hatred of the West, and that led to the tragic and ongoing consequences. So you can see how their understanding of this particular worldview led to action, even if it is not action that most followers of Islam would themselves be engaged in. Okay, so to move on from that example, we're going to talk just a little bit about the forms that religion takes and how they are hooked on to political organization, modes of subsistence, and other parts of our life. Okay, I want to talk about totemism as a method of feeling connected to the natural world. You know, early research in Native American groups saw that many clans they looked at claimed to be descended from particular animals. Anthropologists describe these as totemic species, and they're part of a system that associates particular social groups with specific animal or plant species as a personal emblem. We see this not only in Native American religion, but also in sports teams, where the emblem of the team acts as a totem. One of these is spiritual and one is secular, but it does serve to inculcate group membership in each group, right? So they think of themselves as strongly one thing and strongly opposed to other groups, okay? We also see when we look at religion, Siberian shamans and shamans in places and other places in the world. These are religious leaders whose job it is to communicate the needs of the living to the spirit world, often through some kind of a religious trance. Folks who work as shamans are usually in smaller scale societies, though, and are part-time religious practitioners as opposed to full-time religious specialists, which you're going to find in more complex societies. Let me talk about that. Okay. So, speaking of more complex societies, one of the ways that these systems of religious symbols can work is to unify people around a shared identity, but also reinforce social hierarchy. You can see this in, the Egyptian pharaohs would be a good example here, right? They were seen as a physical, earthly manifestation of the gods, and they were hooked onto a specific set of totemic symbols, right? And that helped to reinforce how this system was set up. All right. Now, most societies in our history were polytheistic, but the ancient Hebrews diverged from this norm by seeing Yahweh as the one true God. This was a shift towards monotheism that persists to this day. Monotheistic systems tend to present themselves as world religions, religions that are supposed to be significant to all peoples. This is generally untrue of most of the animistic and polytheistic religions. The three big monotheistic traditions are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and all of these became state religions. The religious message and ritual help to support the government of the state. They have some differences between them, but have sort of the same general system. Then we see the world religions of Asia, Hinduism and Buddhism. They are both polytheistic and non-theistic, respectively. In these systems, we find that they help to support a set of political leaders that are also not focused on one individual that leads the whole country. And of course, the Buddhist followers are working on a path towards compassion and selflessness. Now, anthropologists see atheists and agnostics on other non-believers as still having a worldview like Christians, Jews, Muslims, and Buddhists do. The details of their worldview are usually secular, but they're still built around systems. And they still have ritual. We have ritual about all kinds of things in our life. Some of those rituals we find to be spiritually significant, and some of them we don't. Religious rituals are often described as magical, and by magical we mean that they are an explanatory system of causation that does not follow naturalist explanations and works as a system without direct physical contact. Okay, to a believer in magical powers, even magical powers within sort of the major accepted religions that we understand, these forces are very real and consequential. You could think here of the power of prayer, for instance. And when we look at magic more broadly, we see two different kinds of magic, two different kinds of ways of interacting with the supernatural to end up with the outcome that you'd like to see. One of these is imitative magic, in which you are doing something to something that looks like the thing you want to affect. Think here of voodoo dolls, right? So you do something to a piece of the voodoo doll, and that does something to the human that it's supposed to look like. The second of these is the law of contagion, right? Where a representative object is contaminated by a person and believed to harm the person due to it. The law of contagion is the reason why many folks who believe in magic don't want their hair or nail clippings to become lost, because they are part of that person, and anything done to them could be done to the person as well. Now, you're going to say to yourself, oh my goodness, my religion would never get down with magic, right? But when you look at the way we've described these, Catholic communion, for instance, combines both of these laws of magic to the symbolic wafer and wine. Okay, and one of the very most important forms of ritual worldwide is the rite of passage. This is a life cycle event that moves a person from one social status within the group to another social status. And we see these in many, many different parts of people's lives. Okay, so we don't really have time in this video, which has gotten quite long, to also describe how religion is linked to social and political action. So I'll look forward to you all reading that on your own. I can't wait to see what you have to say about religion and magic in the forums this week. And I want to remind you that we are more concerned here with religion as a worldwide social structure, and a little bit less with your own personal belief system that might help to shape your response, but it's not really what we're writing about this week. Okay, thanks so much. I'll see you in the discussion.